By 1971, muscle cars were vanishing fast. Insurance rates for performance engines had exploded, and AMC's share of the market was sinking below 3%. Yet, that's when a tiny team built the most powerful, indestructible V8 the company ever made at the exact moment buyers wanted nothing to do with power. If the AMC 401 really was the last great American engine nobody wanted, how did its perfect engineering become a curse? And what does that reveal about the collapse of America's muscle car dream? In December 1970, a single piece of legislation changed the future of American performance cars almost overnight. The Clean Air Act handed the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, sweeping power over what came out of every car's tailpipe. For the first time, automakers faced strict limits on carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and nitrogen oxides. The law set a deadline. By 1975, new cars had to cut emissions by 90% compared to levels in 1970. This wasn't just a technical challenge, it was a direct blow to the muscle car formula. High compression, aggressive camshafts, and big carburetors suddenly meant trouble with regulators. Engineers scrambled to lower compression ratios and redesign cylinder heads, but every fix meant less power and more complexity. For buyers, the impact was immediate. Models that once promised thunderous acceleration now arrived with detuned engines and higher price tags, thanks to the cost of new emissions controls. The Clean Air Act didn't just slow down cars, it forced an entire industry to rethink what performance could mean. As the EPA's authority grew, automakers realized the era of raw horsepower was ending, whether anyone liked it or not. Insurance companies did not just raise rates for muscle cars in the early 1970s, they turned the entire market upside down. For anyone under 25, buying a high-powered car meant paying premiums that could double or triple the cost of ownership, sometimes more. Performance models became a financial risk few families were willing to take. At the same time, AMC's position in the industry was growing more precarious. With only about 3% of the market, AMC was dwarfed by the big three. Their budgets were tight, their dealer network was shrinking, and every new model carried real risk. The company's annual reports from this era paint a clear picture. Resources were stretched thin, and survival depended on making every dollar count. Behind closed doors, engineers felt the pressure. There was no room for expensive experiments or grand redesigns. Every technical decision had to be justified. Every part had to serve double duty. While Detroit's giants could afford to absorb the shock of falling sales and rising costs, AMC's future hung in the balance. In this environment, the group of engineers who would shape the 401 V8 worked quietly, knowing that their efforts might be the company's last shot at relevance. Their challenge was not just building a powerful engine, it was building hope on a shoestring. Inside the 401 block, every choice reflected a battle between cost and survival. AMC engineers couldn't afford a ground-up redesign, so they doubled down on what mattered most: strength. The block itself was cast with extra thick walls, using high nickel iron for added heat resistance and durability. This wasn't a luxury on AMC's budget, it was a gamble. More material meant higher cost per unit, but it also meant fewer warranty claims and a reputation for engines that didn't quit. At the heart of the 401, the crankshaft spun on main bearings, measuring 2.749 inches in diameter, matching the size found in some of Detroit's biggest big blocks. Oversized mains weren't just a spec sheet brag. They gave the engine a safety margin for abuse, letting it survive the pounding of high-rev launches, police pursuit, and heavy towing. Engineers kept the forged steel crank and rods from the 390, parts proven to take punishment without complaint. Internal memos from the winter of 1970 show AMC's change orders calling for thicker block sections and no compromise on bearing size, even as accountants pushed for cheaper alternatives. The result was an engine that could shrug off detonation, survive poor oil, and rack up miles most muscle car engines never dreamed of. In a world where every dollar counted, AMC's team spent where it mattered, inside the block, where durability is born. The numbers told a story that specs alone could not capture. The AMC 401 V8, fresh from the factory, spun the dyno rollers to a peak of 330 horsepower at 5,000 revolutions per minute. But the real magic happened lower in the rev range. At just 3,400 revolutions per minute, the torque curve surged to 430 pound-feet, more than enough to shove a heavy Javelin or Matador down the quarter mile with authority. Period dyno sheets from 1971 show the engine's output was not just about top-end bragging rights. The curve stayed flat and strong across the mid-range, delivering instant response the moment you touch the throttle. Engineers who worked on the 401 described it as a muscle car engine with the heart of a truck. One recalled that they wanted torque you could feel, not just numbers on a brochure. That relentless pull, right off idle, made the 401 feel bigger than its competitors, even when the peak horsepower looked similar on paper. For drivers, this meant effortless acceleration in real-world conditions, whether merging onto highways or hauling loads. The dyno did not just prove AMC's claims, it gave the 401 a reputation for power that you could actually use, not just admire from a distance. When the 401-powered Javelin AMX rolled onto dealer floors in 1971, anticipation quickly gave way to disappointment. Production records show just 2,054 cars left the factory with the new engine, a fraction of what AMC hoped for. One dealer, staring at a row of unsold Javelins, reportedly muttered that he could count the people asking for a 401 on one hand and still have fingers left over. The scene played out across the country. Cars that should have drawn crowds sat untouched, while buyers lined up for smaller, thriftier models. AMC's gamble on performance collided head-on with reality. Meanwhile, Chevrolet moved over 60,000 Chevelle SS units that same year, dwarfing AMC's numbers and underlining how far the company had fallen behind. The excitement of a new big block launch faded into silence, punctuated only by the sound of showroom doors closing early. For AMC, the debut of the 401 was not a comeback. It was a warning that the world had moved on. A Jeep owner in Colorado keeps a spiral-bound logbook for his 1976 CJ. Every oil change and tune-up carefully recorded. Meticulous records. The odometer rolled past 300,000 miles years ago, but the original 401 V8 still starts with a single turn of the key. Still, he has replaced hoses, belts, and even the clutch, but the engine itself has never needed more than valve cover gaskets and fresh plugs. Reliable. Stories like his are scattered across the country. Engines that were overlooked in showrooms now living out their days as daily drivers, trail rigs, and tow vehicles. Scattered. Auction houses have noticed. Cars that once drew shrugs now draw crowds, and a 1971 Javelin AMX with a factory 401 can bring $45,000 or more under the bright lights. Draw crowds. An auctioneer flipping through recent sales calls the 401 a hidden gem. People did not want them back then. Now they cannot get enough. The production line for the 401 shut down in 1979, and AMC itself closed its doors in 1987. Endings. Yet the engine refuses to fade away. Its reputation is no longer about lost opportunity, but about lasting value. It is proof that sometimes the world catches up, even if it takes decades. Lasting value. Today, as automakers chase efficiency and nostalgia drives up classic values, the 401 stands as proof that brilliance can be overlooked when the world is not ready. Every restored 401 roaring back to life is a reminder. Timing shapes legacy, but engineering endures far beyond market trends.